At 0800 hours on December 17, 1944, in Bullingen, Belgium, SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper observed his troops replenishing their tanks. The fuel, the jerry cans, even the tanks themselves, were American, seized from the enemy. American prisoners of war, under duress, were forced to operate the pumps, a stark humiliation for the captured and a grim efficiency for the Germans. This audacious act was a desperate gamble, a sign of the immense logistical challenges that would ultimately decide the fate of Peiper's entire offensive. We will later uncover the true scale of the American logistical prowess that would doom German ambitions. Peiper commanded Kampfgruppe Peiper, the spearhead of the 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandard Adolf Hitler, a formidable force of 4,800 men, supported by 117 tanks and assault guns. Their objective was straightforward: breach American defenses, drive rapidly westward, seize the bridges over the Meuse River, and thereby sever the Allied armies. This offensive, codenamed Operation Watch on the Rhine by Hitler, had commenced 30 hours prior. It represented the largest German assault in the West since 1940, involving 3 armies and 250,000 men, backed by 1,400 tanks and assault guns. The ultimate prize was Antwerp, a move designed to isolate British and Canadian forces, compelling the Americans into negotiations and fundamentally altering the trajectory of the war. However, a critical vulnerability plagued this ambitious plan: fuel. The German High Command had allotted merely 5 million gallons of gasoline for the entire offensive, a quantity basic calculations indicated was half of what the Panzers required to reach Antwerp. The planners were aware of this shortfall. Their proposed solution was equally stark: capture American fuel depots, appropriate what was needed, and press onward. Peiper's divisional intelligence officer had provided him with a map before the attack, detailing U.S. military bases, including American supply installations, fuel dumps, and ammunition depots. The intelligence proved accurate: American supplies were ubiquitous. The crucial question was whether German forces could seize these depots before the Americans destroyed them. Bülingen served as the initial test. Peiper's Kampfgruppe had secured the town at 0730 that morning. The American withdrawal had been so swift that everything was abandoned, including an intact fuel depot containing 50,000 gallons. This was sufficient to refuel Peiper's entire spearhead and maintain their westward thrust. Peiper had ordered the American prisoners to operate the pumps, reasoning that his own men, having fought for 36 consecutive hours, were exhausted. This arrangement was efficient and, in Peiper's view, psychologically demoralizing for the captives. The fuel flowed, jerry cans passing hand to hand. Each can held 5 gallons, meaning 10 cans per tank. With over 100 tanks, this equated to 5,000 gallons, a process that would consume precious hours. Every minute spent stationary offered the Americans an opportunity to organize their defenses. Yet, without fuel, the Panzers were impotent, mere steel hulks on treads. Peiper had learned this bitter lesson on the Eastern Front, where the finest tank in the world was useless with an empty tank. In 1943, the Wehrmacht had lost more vehicles to fuel shortages than to Soviet combat. Entire German divisions had been immobilized, tanks abandoned, and positions overrun because the Panzers could not advance. Now, in Belgium, the same predicament arose. German logistics had faltered. The fuel designated for the offensive was stranded behind the lines, caught in traffic congestion or on bombed-out roads. American troops were in retreat, but American fighter-bombers relentlessly attacked anything that moved during daylight hours. The vital supply trucks were not arriving, leaving Peiper with a stark choice: capture American fuel or halt his advance. Hauptsturmführer Gerd Neuski, Peiper's personal staff officer and a reliable veteran since France, approached. Neuski reported that the fuel situation was graver than anticipated. The 50,000 gallons at Bülingen would barely get them to Stavelot, and even that was uncertain. Beyond Stavelot, more fuel would be essential. Peiper already knew this. His intelligence map indicated another, larger depot at Stavelot. He anticipated the Americans would either defend it vigorously or destroy it. Regardless, Peiper had to reach it swiftly. The refueling continued. Peiper surveyed the captured depot, observing American supplies meticulously organized and abundant. Ammunition crates, medical provisions, rations, and winter clothing were stacked everywhere, all labeled and readily available. He picked up a small, brown, waterproof cardboard box marked k-ration, meal, combat, individual, breakfast unit. Inside, he found a can of chopped ham and eggs, hard biscuits, a chocolate bar, for cigarettes, instant coffee, sugar tablets, chewing gum, a wooden spoon, matches, toilet paper, and a can opener. Everything a soldier needed for a single meal, packaged in a book-sized box weighing less than a pound, requiring no cooking or field kitchen, just open and eat. Having commanded combat units since 1940, Peiper understood the German soldiers' rations. The standard German field ration, when it arrived at all, required cooking, came in bulk containers, and necessitated field kitchens for preparation. The bread was hard, the meat mostly fat, and quality had steadily declined since 1943. By late 1944, frontline units were fortunate to receive anything. Peiper's own Kampfgruppe had left Germany with only 3 days of rations, which were long gone. His men had been subsisting on whatever they could find, captured American food, provisions taken from Belgian civilians, and in some units, even slaughtered horses. He examined the k-ration box, noting the October 1944 manufacture date stamped on the bottom. These rations were only months old, supplies manufactured weeks prior were already at the front. When Noisky approached, Peiper handed him the box. Noisky opened the ham and eggs, eating it cold. His face registered surprise. The food was good, superior to anything German soldiers had eaten in months. He then noted the other items: real coffee, real chocolate, American cigarettes, even small luxuries like matches, toilet paper, and gum. Peiper remained silent, performing mental calculations. If every American soldier received 3 such boxes daily, that amounted to 3 meals. With 10 million American soldiers globally, that meant 30 million individual meal boxes every day, or 900 million per month. The industrial capacity required for such production was staggering, a scale Germany had never achieved. Despite mobilizing its entire armaments industry for total war since 1939, producing tanks, aircraft, and ammunition, Germany could not adequately feed its own soldiers. Yet, the Americans were packaging individual meals in waterproof boxes, complete with luxuries like chewing gum. Noisky pointed out the depot contained hundreds, perhaps thousands, of these boxes, and this was merely one supply point in one small town. How many depots did the Americans possess? How much food? How much of everything? Peiper had fought the Soviets in the East, witnessing their logistics, crude but effective mass production, endless convoys of trucks, factories in the Urals beyond German reach. The Soviets could replace losses faster than Germany could inflict them. But Soviet logistics seemed primitive compared to this. The Soviets moved supplies in bulk, the Americans individually packaged everything. The Soviets relied on quantity, the Americans combined quantity with quality. Every item Peiper examined showcased meticulous engineering, waterproof packaging, compact design, and a long shelf life. This was not emergency improvisation but deliberate industrial planning. SS Sturmbannführer Werner Pochk, commanding the remnants of the 1st SS Panzer Battalion, arrived, having lost tanks during the advance and requiring resupply. His battalion was critically low on fuel and ammunition. Peiper informed him that fuel was being distributed, and ammunition would come from captured American stocks, specifically crates of American 75mm shells that fit German guns. Take what you need. Keep moving. Pochk inquired about food, as his men had not eaten since the previous day. Peiper gestured to the k-rations, take as many as you need. The men should eat now and carry more. There's no telling when the next supply opportunity will come. Poch collected several boxes and distributed them to his tank crews. The men opened the boxes and ate. Peiper watched these experienced soldiers, veterans of France and Russia, treating American emergency field rations like a feast, because, compared to their usual provisions, it was. Refueling concluded at 0930. Peiper gave the order to advance. The Kampfgruppe formed into a march column, tanks first, then half-tracks, followed by support vehicles. The column stretched for several kilometers. Peiper's command vehicle positioned itself near the front. The route led northwest toward Stavelot, a distance of 14 kilometers, potentially 20 minutes at speed on good roads. However, the roads were anything but good, mud, refugees, and destroyed vehicles obstructed their path. The Americans were retreating but still fighting. Every village demanded clearance, every bridge required inspection for demolitions. Peiper's intelligence map indicated a major fuel depot at Stavelot, larger than Bullingen, situated near the town but without an exact location. Peiper assumed it would be obvious. Supply depots were extensive installations with vehicles and storage tanks, impossible to conceal. The Kampfgruppe reached Stavelot at 1200 hours. The town straddled the Meuse River, with a stone bridge at its center. American forces defended the bridge. Peiper's lead tanks engaged them. The Americans, equipped with anti-tank guns, fought fiercely. The battle for Stavelot lasted 3 hours before Peiper's forces finally pushed the Americans back across the river. German engineers inspected the bridge. It was intact, undemolished. The Americans had attempted to blow it, but the charges had failed to detonate. It was a stroke of luck. Without that bridge, the entire advance would have stalled. Peiper's units crossed the bridge and entered the western part of Stavelot, searching for the fuel depot. Intelligence insisted it was there, near the town, containing vast quantities of fuel, enough to sustain the offensive for days. They found nothing. Peiper dispatched reconnaissance teams in all directions, checked the outskirts, the roads, every building. The fuel depot had to be somewhere. The Americans would not abandon 3 million gallons of gasoline. They would either defend it or destroy it. Yet, Peiper's men found no evidence of either. At 1500 hours, one of his reconnaissance officers reported finding American supply dumps north of the town, but only small amounts, scattered jerry cans, perhaps a few thousand gallons in total, not the main depot intelligence had promised. Peiper made a decision. The fuel depot either didn't exist or the Americans had already evacuated it. Either way, he could not afford to wait. His Kampfgruppe possessed just enough fuel to continue the advance, but not much more. The mission was to reach the Meuse River. Every hour stopped was an hour wasted. Move on. The Kampfgruppe departed Stavelot at 1600 hours, continuing westward. Behind them, American engineers, who had been observing from the hills, moved back into position. Once the Germans passed, they secured the bridge approaches. Stavelot would not entirely fall. The Americans would hold positions south of the river. What Peiper did not know was that the fuel depot existed. It was there, 3,200,000 gallons of gasoline, stored in 5-gallon jerry cans, stacked along a 5-mile stretch of road. Depots number 2 and 3, located 800 feet north of the road Peiper had used to approach Stavelot, a mere 300 yards away. Peiper had driven past 3 million gallons of fuel and never saw it. The Americans had not hidden the depot, they had not camouflaged it. The jerry cans were stacked in plain sight along the roadside, thousands of them, millions of gallons, right there. But Peiper expected a fuel depot to resemble German depots, storage tanks, buildings, vehicles, infrastructure. The American depot was simply jerry cans, waiting, undefended, without guards, vehicles, or buildings, just fuel in portable containers, ready for distribution. Peiper drove past it, searching for something that looked like a depot. He never found it because he was looking for the wrong thing. After the war, American historian Major Ken Heckler interviewed Peiper. Heckler informed Peiper about the depot, 3 million gallons, 300 yards from his route. Peiper shrugged, stating he expected fuel to be piled in town squares, as in Bülingen. When he didn't find it in Stavelot, he assumed the Americans had relocated it. That missed depot changed everything. With 3 million gallons, Peiper could have refueled his entire Kampfgruppe multiple times, and even other German units. He could have kept the offensive moving. The fuel crisis that ultimately halted the German advance would not have materialized. But Peiper never found it, and without fuel, his advance was doomed. On December 21, 1944, in Stoumont, Belgium, General McCown crouched in a cellar, listening to German tanks surrounding his position. McCown commanded the 2nd Battalion, 119th Infantry Regiment, 30th Infantry Division. His battalion had been fighting Peiper's Kampfgruppe for 3 days and was now cut off. The situation deteriorated rapidly, German armor was everywhere, and American defensive positions were collapsing. McCown's radio operator reported that German forces had broken through to the south, confirming the battalion was surrounded. At 1,430 hours, German infantry stormed McCown's command post. A brief firefight ensued, resulting in 1 American casualty. McCown and several of his staff were captured. The Germans searched them for weapons and intelligence documents, confiscating personal items like watches, cigarettes, and anything valuable. McCown was taken to a damaged stone house on the edge of Stoumont, Peiper's command post. Windows were broken, walls pockmarked with bullet holes. Inside, German officers studied maps and coordinated defensive positions, for by December 21, Peiper's offensive had stalled. His Kampfgruppe was surrounded, devoid of fuel, ammunition, and supplies, with no path forward and no way back. Peiper stood near a map table, tall, slender, 30 years old, with aristocratic features, and spoke flawless English. He noticed McCown and approached. They were of equal rank, both battalion commanders, 1 German, 1 American, both professional soldiers. Peiper introduced himself, asking McCown's name, unit, and position. McCown provided the information required by the Geneva Convention, name, rank, serial number. Peiper did not press for more, he seemed more interested in conversation than interrogation. That night, Peiper and McCown conversed for 7 hours, from 2300 until 0500 the next morning. They sat in a room with maps, discussing the war. Peiper dominated the conversation, defending Nazism, explaining Germany's fight, and justifying German actions. McCown later remarked that few men had impressed him so profoundly in such a short time. Peiper was intelligent, educated, articulate, and utterly convinced of Germany's eventual victory. Even surrounded, out of fuel, and with his Kampfgruppe disintegrating, Peiper believed Germany would triumph. McCown spent 3 days with Kampfgruppe Peiper, observing everything, German supply conditions, morale, equipment, food, and medical care. He made mental notes, understanding the information's value. What McCown witnessed contradicted Peiper's assertions. Peiper claimed Germany was winning, but the evidence pointed to defeat. German soldiers appeared exhausted, having fought 5 days straight with minimal rest. Many wore fragments of American uniforms, knit caps, gloves, sweaters, overshoes, even overcoats, because their own supply system failed to provide adequate winter gear. Their physical condition was generally good, with no obvious starvation or malnutrition, but they were not eating well. German rations were scarce, most men consumed captured American food, k-rations, seer-rations, 10-in-1 rations, whatever they had seized from overrun American positions. McCown watched German soldiers open American ration boxes, examining the contents like children unwrapping gifts, chocolate bars, real coffee, cigarettes. The small luxuries American soldiers took for granted were precious to German troops, who hadn't seen such items in months. One German soldier showed McCown a can of ham from a k-ration, declaring it superior to anything the Wehrmacht issued. The German army's canned meat was mostly fat and gristle, required cooking, and tasted unpleasant. This American ham was real meat, properly preserved, and edible cold. The soldier commented that if Germany could produce rations like this, the war would be different. McCown, a prisoner, said nothing, knowing argument was futile, but he understood the soldier's implication. If Germany could produce such rations, they would. The inability to do so signified a lack of industrial capacity, and if they lacked the capacity to produce food, they lacked the capacity to produce everything else essential for modern warfare. German medical supplies were critically low. The aid station at Stoumont had no more sulfa drugs, bandages were being reused. Wounded German soldiers screamed during treatment because there was no pain relief. McCown witnessed amputations performed with minimal anesthesia, men biting leather straps, held down by comrades, as bone was sawn through while the patient was conscious, a practice American medical standards would deem medieval. American aid stations provided morphine, sulfa drugs, proper bandages, and sterile instruments, ensuring wounded received pain relief, antibiotics for infection, and professional care. The Germans improvised with inadequate supplies, doing their best, but their best fell far below American standards. On December 22, the Luftwaffe attempted an aerial resupply of Kampfgruppe paper. 6 planes flew low, dropping supply canisters by parachute. The designated drop zone was supposed to be within German lines, but most canisters missed, falling outside the perimeter, where American forces recovered them. German soldiers watched supply canisters land 200 yards away in American positions, beyond their reach. The aerial resupply was a complete failure. Peiper's forces were now utterly isolated, surrounded by American units, without fuel, ammunition, dwindling food, no medical supplies, and no means to evacuate the wounded. With 170 American prisoners and hundreds of German casualties, the situation was untenable. On December 23, Peiper convened a meeting with his senior officers. McCown was present, listening as German officers debated their options. All choices were grim. They could not advance due to lack of fuel. They could not defend indefinitely without ammunition. They could not retreat with vehicles, again, due to fuel shortages. The only viable path was to attempt a breakout on foot, abandoning everything: tanks, half-tracks, vehicles, the wounded who could not walk, and the American prisoners. Peiper made the decision: break out on foot. Destroy the vehicles, leave the wounded with American medical supplies, and release the American prisoners. March east through the forest, attempting to reach German lines. It was the sole option offering his men any chance of survival. The breakout commenced at 0200 hours on December 24. 800 German soldiers moved through darkness, snow, and forest, without vehicles or heavy weapons, carrying only small arms and whatever each man could bear. McCown escaped during the ensuing confusion, reaching American lines on December 25. He immediately filed an after-action report detailing everything he had observed: German supply conditions, equipment status, morale, food situation, and medical care. The report was comprehensive and accurate. McCown later testified at the Malmedy trial in June 1946, appearing as a defense witness. He stated that Peiper's men had treated him correctly under the Geneva Convention. He described the conditions within German lines, the supply failures, the desperation, and the professionalism of German soldiers fighting with inadequate resources. McCown stated one thing unequivocally: the Germans lost at Stoumont not due to American tactical superiority, but because they ran out of supplies, fuel, ammunition, food, medical supplies, everything. The Wehrmacht, once an army that seemed unstoppable, could no longer sustain itself in combat. No logistics, no chance of victory. Peiper abandoned 7 Tiger II tanks at Log-Lise, 50 medium tanks, 70 half-tracks, and 135 other vehicles, all immobilized because their fuel tanks were empty. Some vehicles were destroyed. The most advanced armored vehicles in the world were left behind, useless. The tanks were intact, functional, loaded with ammunition, but without gasoline, they were mere metal sculptures. Belgian civilians later recovered these vehicles, some were placed in museums. Visitors inquire why the Germans abandoned them. The answer is always the same: no fuel. The tanks could not move, the crews could not stay, so they were abandoned. In January 1945, at a prisoner of war camp in France, General der Panzertruppe Otto von Manschufel sat in an interrogation room, answering questions from American intelligence officers. Manschufel commanded the 5th Panzer Army during the Ardennes offensive, a professional soldier and career officer, a veteran of the Eastern Front. He had opposed the Ardennes plan from its inception. The American officers posed detailed questions: German objectives, allocated resources, and what went wrong. Manschufel answered honestly. For him, the war was over, no reason to lie. His responses would become official foreign military studies manuscripts and historical records. Manschufel explained that he and Field Marshal Model had argued against Hitler's plan. They advocated for a limited offensive with smaller, more realistic objectives. Hitler, however, demanded Antwerp, crossing the Meuse River, splitting the Allied armies, and forcing negotiations. Hitler's plan was strategically impossible with the available resources, making success unattainable. 5 million gallons for 3 armies, 1,400 tanks, and thousands of vehicles, basic mathematics showed it was insufficient. The planning assumed capturing American fuel depots, an assumption Manschufel deemed a gamble. Military operations cannot be predicated on seizing enemy supplies. What if the Americans destroy the depots? What if they cannot be found? What if they are successfully defended? All 3 scenarios occurred: some depots were destroyed, some were never found, and some were defended. The fuel crisis began immediately and never abated. Manschufel stated his tank units were desperate for fuel as early as December 19, the second day of the offensive. Units were already running dry, supply trucks were not reaching the front, and captured fuel was inadequate. The entire offensive ground to a halt as panzers sat immobile, awaiting gasoline that never arrived. The American interrogators inquired about German logistics in general. Manschufel was frank: German logistics had collapsed, not just during the Ardennes offensive, but the entire system. Since 1943, perhaps earlier, the Eastern Front had shattered German logistics. The distances were too vast, the roads too poor, Soviet resistance too strong. German trucks broke down faster than they could be repaired. Railways were under constant attack. The Wehrmacht became reliant on horses, hundreds of thousands of them, pulling supply wagons as in 1870. By late 1944, some German divisions possessed more horses than German divisions in World War I. Mechanized warfare fought with horse-drawn logistics, the contradiction was fatal. Tanks moved faster than horses, panzers could advance 20 kilometers per hour, while supply wagons needed a full day to cover the same distance. Combat units outran their logistics, then stopped, immobilized, waiting for supplies that arrived too late or not at all. Horse dependence created additional problems. Horses required food, approximately 20 pounds of fodder per day per animal. A division with 5,000 horses needed 50 tons of horse feed daily merely to sustain its logistics system. That feed had to be transported on roads already congested with military traffic. Horses also died from exhaustion, aerial attacks, or inadequate feed. Dead horses blocked roads and required burial or disposal. American logistics, in contrast, relied exclusively on trucks. Trucks did not require daily feeding, they sat idle when not needed without consuming resources. They moved faster, carried more, and required less maintenance than horse-drawn wagons. The American truck fleet numbered in the hundreds of thousands, all standardized designs, using interchangeable parts, supported by a massive spare part supply system. Allied strategic bombing exacerbated German problems. Every rail junction was a target, every bridge destroyed, every road strafed by fighter bombers. German logistics units could only move at night, daylight movement guaranteed destruction from the air. American P-47s and P-51s attacked anything that moved. Supply columns were incinerated, fuel trucks destroyed, food convoys shot up. German production could not replace losses. Factories were bombed, raw materials scarce, and skilled workers conscripted into combat units. The industrial base was crumbling. What factories did produce often could not reach the front due to destroyed transportation networks. Manchufel contrasted this with American logistics. The Americans possessed secure supply lines, factories in America were safe from bombing, 3,000 miles from the fighting, producing war materials at rates Germany could never match. Ships constantly traversed the Atlantic, delivering supplies. The port of Antwerp alone handled more tonnage per month than all German ports combined. American supply depots were ubiquitous, fuel, ammunition, food, spare parts, everything, organized, abundant, redundant. Multiple depots meant losing one was inconsequential. Standardized containers meant soldiers could handle supplies without specialized training. Abundant production meant some waste was acceptable if it accelerated distribution. German logistics had no excess capacity, every supply dump was critical, every fuel truck precious, every ration counted. The Wehrmacht operated on the brink of collapse constantly. One disruption meant crisis, two disruptions meant disaster. The American officers asked Manchufel when he realized Germany would lose the war. Manchufel stated he knew in 1943, after Kursk. The Wehrmacht could still win battles, but winning battles was insufficient. Germany needed to win the war, which required resources Germany lacked: industrial capacity, oil, food, manpower, time. The Americans possessed all of these. Functionally unlimited industrial capacity, secure oil supplies from Texas and the Middle East, agricultural production feeding both military and civilians, a population of 130 million, and time to mobilize and deploy that population. Germany had lost the resource war before the shooting war ended. Once America entered the conflict, German defeat was inevitable. Not immediate, not easy, but inevitable. The mathematics were simple: America could produce more tanks, more planes, more bullets, more food, more of everything than Germany could destroy. Eventually, American material superiority would grind German resistance into dust. The Ardennes offensive was a final, desperate gamble: use the last strategic reserves, achieve one dramatic victory, force the Allies to negotiate. Hitler believed will and courage could overcome material disadvantage. Manchufel knew better. Will and courage mattered, but logistics mattered more. An army without supplies cannot fight, regardless of its soldiers' bravery. The offensive failed. German losses were catastrophic: 600 tanks destroyed or abandoned, 34,000 killed, 60,000 wounded or missing. The Wehrmacht's last mobile reserves were gone. After the Ardennes, Germany could only retreat. No more offensives, no more grand strategic plans, just fighting delaying actions until the inevitable end. Manchufel was asked to write detailed reports on the Ardennes offensive, covering 5th Panzer Army operations, planning, execution, and lessons learned. He produced 148 pages, then another 161 pages, published as Foreign Military Studies manuscripts B-151 and B-151A. These were professional military analyses, balanced assessments, crediting American performance and honestly evaluating German failures. His tone was clinical, detached, and professional. He faulted German shortcomings and credited Allied successes, offering no excuses or propaganda, just factual analysis: this is what happened, this is why it happened. These were the mistakes, these were the consequences. Other German generals were less honest in their post-war statements, blaming Hitler, the weather, or bad luck, everything except the fundamental problem: Germany lacked the industrial and logistical capacity to sustain modern warfare against opponents with superior resources. Manschufel made no such excuses, he stated facts. Germany lost because Germany was outproduced, outsupplied, and outsustained. The German army in December 1944 was still capable of tactical excellence, but tactical excellence without strategic resources meant eventual defeat. The interrogation concluded. Manschufel was returned to the prisoner compound. He would spend the next year in American custody, then be released and return to Germany, living a long post-war life. He lectured at West Point in 1968 and gave interviews for documentaries, remaining a professional soldier, providing honest analysis until his death. His legacy was his honesty. Unlike many German generals who rewrote history to excuse failures, Manschufel told the truth: the Ardennes offensive failed because of logistics. The war was lost because of industrial capacity. No amount of tactical skill could overcome material disadvantage. In February 1946, in a cell in Nuremberg, Germany, SS Obersturmbannführer Joseph Sepp Dietrich awaited his trial. Dietrich commanded the 6th SS Panzer Army during the Ardennes offensive. A former butcher and Hitler's bodyguard, he had been promoted far beyond his competence. An American psychiatrist, Leon Goldenson, interviewed Dietrich, documenting the psychological state of Nazi war criminals. On February 28, Goldenson spoke with Dietrich about the war, National Socialism, the offensive, and defeat. At one point, Dietrich made a sardonic comment about his army: "We call ourselves the 6th Panzer Army because we've only got 6 panzers left." Dark humor, gallows humor, but accurate. The offensive had destroyed his army. Losses were staggering, equipment gone, men dead or captured, what remained barely qualified as a functioning military unit. Dietrich was not a strategic thinker. Hermann Göring later remarked of him, "He is decent but stupid." He had at most the ability to command a division. Hitler had given him an army, the results were predictable. The 6th Panzer Army, intended to lead the main thrust, instead bogged down immediately due to poor planning, traffic jams, fuel shortages, and American resistance. Dietrich's army was allocated fuel for 90 to 100 miles of travel. The distance to Antwerp was 140 miles. Even if everything went perfectly, the fuel allocation was insufficient. The plan explicitly required capturing American gasoline depots. Without captured fuel, the offensive could not succeed. The entire operation was premised on seizing enemy supplies, a dependency that exposed German logistical bankruptcy. Military operations cannot be planned around capturing enemy resources, it is desperation disguised as strategy. Professional officers like Manschufel understood this, political appointees like Dietrich did not. Goldenson asked Dietrich about the offensive's failure. Dietrich blamed everything except logistics. He blamed American air power, the weather, the terrain, and Hitler for unrealistic objectives, all valid criticisms. But he never mentioned that his army ran out of fuel because German logistics could not sustain the attack. After the war, analyses by both American and German military historians reached the same conclusion: the Ardennes offensive failed primarily due to logistics. Fuel shortages halted the advance. Ammunition shortages limited artillery support. Food shortages degraded soldier effectiveness. Medical supply shortages meant wounded died who could have been saved. German tactical performance was often excellent, individual units fought well, officers made good decisions with available resources, and soldiers showed courage and skill. But tactics cannot overcome logistical failures. An army without fuel cannot advance, an army without ammunition cannot fight. The Americans won the Battle of the Bulge not primarily through superior forces or tactics, but through superior logistics. They moved reinforcements faster than Germans advanced. They adequately supplied defensive positions. They replaced losses from reserves. They sustained operations through winter conditions that degraded German capabilities. American logistics in December 1944 represented 5 years of mature development, massive infrastructure, dedicated logistics units, specialized vehicles, standardized procedures, and supply depots strategically positioned across Europe. Transportation networks moved supplies from American factories to frontline foxholes in weeks. In April 1945, at an American interrogation center in Germany, Joachim Peiper sat across from American interrogators, answering questions about Kampfgruppe Peiper's operations. The war was ending, Germany was collapsing. Peiper would soon face war crimes charges for the Malmedy massacre. But for now, the Americans sought information about tactical operations. Peiper described the offensive in detail: planning, explanation, execution, problems encountered, and decisions made. He was cooperative and professional, answering questions accurately, without defiance or evasion, just factual responses from one soldier to others. The Americans inquired about fuel. When did you run out? Where did you refuel? What depots did you capture? Peiper explained the fuel crisis. Bülingen provided 50,000 gallons, enough to reach Stavelot. But at Stavelot, he found no major depot, only small amounts scattered along roads, insufficient. He continued west with minimal fuel, reached Stoumont, and ran completely dry. An American officer asked if Peiper knew about the depot at Stavelot, 3 million gallons, 800 feet from your route. Peiper stated he did not know. The interrogator showed him a map, pointing to the depot location, explaining that thousands of jerry cans were stacked along that road, right there. Peiper had passed within 300 yards. Peiper looked at the map for a long moment, then shrugged, smiled slightly, and said in English, "I am sorry." The interrogator asked why he missed it. Peiper explained he expected fuel to be concentrated in the town, piled in the square as in Bülingen. When he did not find it, he assumed the Americans had evacuated it. He never thought to look for jerry cans stacked along a roadside. The interrogator made notes. Peiper continued describing subsequent operations: the advance to Stoumont, the encirclement, the decision to break out on foot, the abandonment of all vehicles, and the retreat through the forest back to German lines. Peiper never expressed regret about the missed depot, showing no emotion or frustration, just a tactical error explained in professional terms. He missed an opportunity, that happens in war. Move on. But that missed opportunity changed the battle. With 3 million gallons, Kampfgruppe Peiper could have refueled multiple times, continued advancing, reached the Meuse River, and achieved the breakthrough that was the offensive's objective. Or perhaps not. Even with unlimited fuel, Peiper still faced American resistance, American air power once the weather cleared, and American reinforcements moving faster than he could advance. Logistics was critical, but not everything. Fuel alone would not have won the battle, but it would have altered the outcome. The Germans would have advanced further, caused more casualties, captured more territory. The battle would have lasted longer. The strategic situation would have been different, all because Peiper drove past 3 million gallons of gasoline and never saw it. The depot was there, visible, accessible, undefended. He passed within 300 yards and missed it completely because he was looking for something that resembled a German depot, organized infrastructure, buildings, guards. The American depot was just fuel, stacked, ready, waiting, no infrastructure needed. That was American logistics, simple, efficient, abundant. No wasted energy or effort on structures that did not contribute to the mission. Just put the supplies where they are needed, soldiers will figure out how to use them. German logistics were more complicated: formal structures, designated supply points, official procedures. The system worked when everything functioned correctly, but it was fragile. Disrupt any part, and the whole system failed. American logistics was resilient, redundant, and flexible. Multiple depots meant losing one was inconsequential. Standardized containers meant soldiers could handle supplies without special training. Abundant production meant some waste was acceptable if it increased distribution speed. These were fundamental differences in approach. German logistics emphasized control and efficiency, American logistics emphasized abundance and speed. In a long war, the American approach won. The interrogation ended. Peiper was returned to confinement. He would face trial, conviction, and a prison sentence, eventually release, a long post-war life, and death in France in 1976 under mysterious circumstances. His military career was thoroughly documented, his tactical decisions analyzed, his failures and successes recorded. The missed fuel depot at Stavelot remained his most consequential tactical error. Not a moral failing, not a war crime, just a mistake. He looked in the wrong place, assumed the wrong thing, and missed an opportunity that could have changed the battle. That error symbolized the larger German failure. The Wehrmacht was looking for something that did not exist. They expected American logistics to operate like German logistics, concentrated depots, formal structures, predictable patterns. But American logistics was different, distributed, flexible, abundant. The k-ration encapsulated this reality in a form German soldiers could hold in their hands. It wasn't the sole reason America won, but a representation of why America won. 500 million k-rations were produced in 1944 alone, each containing 2,830 calories across 3 individually packaged meals, manufactured in American factories safe from bombing, shipped across the Atlantic, and distributed to soldiers fighting on multiple continents simultaneously. German soldiers opened these boxes and saw food. They should have seen industrial capacity, transportation networks, an economic system that produced millions of meal packages monthly and delivered them anywhere needed. The small luxuries included chocolate, cigarettes, chewing gum, demonstrated excess capacity. America could afford to add non-essentials because their production was that abundant. German rations by late 1944 reflected a failing system, inadequate nutrition, poor quality, irregular distribution, dependence on field kitchens that could not always operate. Everything reflected resource scarcity and industrial strain. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, Wehrmacht soldiers were starving. Rations had collapsed, supply systems had disintegrated. Many German prisoners of war gained weight in American captivity because they received regular meals for the first time in months. One German prisoner remarked, "When I was captured, I weighed 128 pounds. After 2 years as an American prisoner of war, I weighed 185. I had gotten so fat you could no longer see my eyes." American prison camp rations were superior to German combat rations. The Battle of the Bulge concluded in January 1945. German forces withdrew to their starting positions. American forces counterattacked. By March, the Allies had crossed the Rhine. By April, they were surrounding Berlin. By May, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The Ardennes offensive consumed Germany's last strategic reserves without achieving strategic objectives. It delayed the Allied advance by several weeks and inflicted casualties, but it did not alter the war's outcome. The 15 units committed to the Ardennes were the best Germany had left. After the offensive, those units were gone, destroyed, scattered, incapable of sustained operations. American forces grew stronger in that same period. More divisions arrived from the United States, more equipment, more supplies. The logistics system continued functioning efficiently. When Germany surrendered, American forces in Europe were at peak strength and capability. Germany lost World War II because it could not sustain modern warfare against opponents with superior industrial and logistical capacity. Strategic errors and tactical mistakes contributed, but the fundamental disparity was economic. The United States and the Soviet Union both possessed industrial economies capable of producing war materials faster than Germany could destroy them. Germany did not. That disparity determined the outcome. American logistical superiority extended beyond rations. Consider vehicle production. the United States manufactured 400,000 trucks during the war, Germany produced 140,000. American factories delivered 63,000 tanks, German factories delivered 46,000. But German tanks required more maintenance, more fuel, more spare parts. American tanks were simpler, more reliable, and easier to maintain in field conditions. The gap widened in aircraft production. America built 300,000 military aircraft during the war, Germany built 120,000. American bombers struck German factories with impunity while American fighters controlled European skies. German aircraft production declined throughout 1944 despite desperate efforts to increase output. Allied bombing destroyed factories faster than Germany could build new ones. German soldiers at the Battle of the Bulge understood this disparity. They saw American equipment abandoned intact because retreating forces had no time to destroy it. They captured American supply dumps containing more food and ammunition than they had seen in months. They wore American uniforms because German logistics could not deliver adequate winter clothing. Every interaction with captured American supplies reinforced the same lesson: the enemy had everything, Germany had nothing. That knowledge affected German combat effectiveness. Soldiers who know their side is losing fight differently than soldiers who believe victory is possible. German soldiers in December 1944 fought bravely, but bravery has limits when you are cold and hungry and know that even if you win today's battle, tomorrow will bring more American soldiers with more American supplies. American soldiers had opposite expectations. They knew their logistics system worked. They knew if they were surrounded, supplies would be airdropped. They knew if their unit took casualties, replacements would arrive. They knew wounded would receive proper medical care. That confidence enabled sustained resistance even in desperate situations. The Battle of the Bulge demonstrated this repeatedly. American units surrounded at Bastogne received airdrops. American forces pushed back at Saint-Vith received reinforcements. American casualties were evacuated to hospitals with adequate medical supplies. The logistics system functioned under pressure. German logistics collapsed under the same pressure. By January 1945, the logistics differential had become absolute. German units abandoned vehicles for lack of fuel, American units had excess fuel stockpiled. German soldiers scrounged food from civilians, American soldiers received hot meals in field kitchens. German wounded lay in aid stations without morphine, American wounded received pain medication and antibiotics. The final months of the war confirmed what the Battle of the Bulge had demonstrated: Germany could not sustain military operations against an enemy with functioning logistics. As German supply lines completely disintegrated, Wehrmacht units surrendered en masse, not because they lacked courage or tactical skill, but because they lacked food, fuel, ammunition, and hope. When American forces entered Germany in 1945, they found a country whose infrastructure had been destroyed by strategic bombing. Factories were rubble, rail yards were craters, roads were impassable, the industrial base that had supported German military operations no longer existed. Meanwhile, American factories continued producing war materials at full capacity. The economic war had been decided long before the shooting stopped. The k-ration encapsulated this reality in a form German soldiers could hold in their hands: a waterproof cardboard box containing 3 individually packaged meals with luxuries like chocolate and cigarettes, the manufacture date showing recent production, the sheer abundance visible in every captured American supply depot. This was not just food, this was proof of industrial capacity that Germany never possessed and by 1944 could never acquire. Logistics won the war. Tactics mattered, strategy mattered, leadership mattered. But logistics provided the foundation enabling everything else. An army without adequate supplies cannot execute tactics regardless of how skilled its soldiers are, cannot implement strategy regardless of how brilliant its generals are, and cannot sustain combat operations regardless of how motivated its troops are. Germany lost World War II because it could not sustain modern warfare against opponents with superior industrial and logistical capacity. The United States produced more of everything, delivered it faster, and sustained operations longer. The economic disparity made the military outcome inevitable. The k-ration did not cause American victory, but examining one in December 1944, German soldiers held evidence of why they were losing.